Yeah, Jared, nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
It's yeah, it's always a pleasure. Yeah, so today we wanted to diverge a bit, right, into a new area. The last talk was about how Scrum Masters and Agile coaches complement the engineers in the teams for getting this adaptive type of problem solving.
Exactly.
And yes, today it's going to be about motivation. You want to say something before we start through?
This is a juicy topic and it can take a long time, but hopefully it's going to be interesting. So let's dive
Yeah,
in.
we have 20 minutes until the batteries run out, right? So let's keep it short enough. Um, yeah, so what interests me is always the justification of the non-engineers inside the engineering teams.
Hmm.
Yeah? And there are justifications, and I kind of think that one of the justifications is that they make sure that the engineers don't get demotivated.
Hmm.
And you have some thoughts about this?
Yeah, sure. They definitely are part of the motivation spectrum, but they're also part of the hygiene spectrum. And so this is, I think, before we talk about motivation, it's important to talk about hygiene as well because it's part of the complete picture of the workplace. So motivation is really just one's drive to do something, one's drive towards pleasure or one's drive away from pain. The other aspect is hygiene, and what hygiene means is how is the environment set up for you to use your motivation at its fullest, to really go for that pleasure or to really avoid those pains. And so hygiene, when we talk about hygiene, it's not necessarily, are the countertops scrubbed down with bleach or anything like that. There's a lot more to it. It's cleanliness is one part of it. Nobody works their best in a really dirty environment. Uh, it's also more about, do you have the tools that you have? Do you have the team members that you need, the skill sets that you need? Are distractions such as administrative things out of your way? So it's all of this, how well is the environment set up for you to do your best? So in order to really get a motivated employee who performs well, first you need to take care of the hygiene, then you can unleash the motivation. Otherwise, you get into four different quadrants of, you know, poor hygiene and
Yeah.
poor motivation. Obviously, you don't want that kind of environment and you don't want these people. What you want is on the other quadrant, which is high hygiene and high motivation. These are people who perform their best. These are workplaces that perform their best. You can also have low hygiene, high motivation. So imagine this is you really wanting to do something, write a program, film a video, but for some reason your equipment isn't working because you don't have the right stuff. And so you really want to
Yeah,
do it,
that sounds like me. But
right? So
yeah,
you really want to
but
do something,
so
but your environment is somehow failing you. Or there's
yeah,
also,
but we
I just want to address the last quadrant to complete the picture, is that you have a high hygiene, low motivation. So it's like you give a worker, the cleanest environments, you give them everything that they want, the best laptop, the best chair, uh, no meetings on their calendar, perfect hygiene, everybody's out of their way, nothing but encouragement, but they don't have any motivation. So they just sit there at their glorious desk doing nothing, playing solitaire. So those are the four
yeah.
quadrants.
Okay, good. So why do you call it hygiene? So it's like, let's say it's the work environment, right?
Yeah.
But the work environment in a technical sense, correct?
Yeah. And also emotional and psychological. It's kind of everything. It's um, imagine you're trying to make a painting, for instance. Sorry if this is kind of a rough analogy, but you have your paintbrush in your hand and you have your canvas, and you put your paintbrush to the canvas and your paintbrush breaks. Terrible. So you grab another paintbrush and you put it on to the canvas to start to paint, but it goes through the canvas. And then you need to get another canvas, but you know it's in the basement, and then you bring it back up, and on the way you knock over your paint. I mean, this is a terribly unhygienic workplace. Again, it's not about, are there germs on something, but it's more about is the environment set up for you to get stuff done? And in the example that I gave, nothing's getting done because you're always fighting your environment, or your environment's fighting you. And so, yeah, hygiene is really about, how things are set up. Is the environment brought up to a level of specification where you can actually get something done? And it's all a spectrum, right? And so what workplaces need to do is focus on improving the hygiene continuously, whether that's the environment, social, emotional, political, all of these different things, administrative, these are all hygiene factors. And then once you get past a certain threshold of hygiene, then you can start to worry about motivating people. Otherwise, you're going to create a lot of frustration first. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be the demotivation by bad hygiene. Yeah. I have not made a video about that yet. But so, just for understanding it a bit better, so we have this like two-dimensional kind of area. You said with the 4 quadrants, right? Where one dimension is the motivation, and the other one is the hygiene.
Exactly.
And now the question is, how do these non-engineers in the team, like Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, how do they contribute to these 2 dimensions? Right?
That's a really good question. And I think that's kind of the critical one when we're talking about adaptive leadership and the adaptive challenges. So there are a lot of things that are going on in the company. There's the administrative layer, there's the political layer, and there's the technical layer, like the engineering that actually gets done, etc. And they're all kind of jumbled together. And so each team has its own internal politics. Each area has its own internal politics. Each department has it's all kind of nested up like this. And the less that the engineers need to worry about the political spectrum, for instance, the better they can do their job. And so there are other aspects that the Scrum Masters take part in. Again, it's the addressing the adaptive challenges. And so, for instance, there's left alone, generally there's a tendency that as companies scale, as business scales, there's more of a drift towards this kind of top-down management, top-down leadership style. And that's kind of a natural consequence. That can, however, be resisted. And for large companies that want to perform well, they do need to resist that kind of natural drift towards, calcifying into this very top-down, highly regimented thing, because that's not a good environment for innovation. And so in order to counteract that, there's a lot of things that can happen. For instance, the company can invite an agile transformation, or the company can invite agile coaches, for instance, to help resist that. And so Scrum Masters are really just part of that spectrum. They deal at the team level for resisting that kind of thing. For instance, the Scrum Master has full right to deny the PO, for instance, from adding additional work during a sprint. That's kind of one of the sacred rights of a Scrum Master, is to deny that kind of thing, because natural tendency, especially in these larger corporations, is there's a lot of pressure to deliver and to deliver now and cheaply, and so there's this drift towards, hey, why not just add a couple of more things and we can get them done.
Yeah.
But there's that kind of psychological political spectrum that the Scrum Master needs to tend to maintain the hygiene of, so that the goalpost for each sprint doesn't continually get moved. Because if it does, then why bother doing a sprint?
Yeah, so but this is, I mean, I would say this rejecting some work package is just one of the daily conflicts, right?
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is that the Scrum Master supports the team by kind of shielding it from some conflicts which otherwise the team would have go through by itself.
Yeah, absolutely,
correct?
Absolutely. This is an excellent example of hygiene and how Scrum Master improves the hygiene of the team. So by shielding it from different things, the ambitions of people higher up in the chain, etc., other pressures like that, the team can actually not have to worry about that and actually get down and do the work that they're there to do.
And so the assumption is that if you shield the team, kind of let the team only do or concentrate on the internal conflicts, which are probably big enough, that will lead to a better motivation.
Sure.
Correct?
Well, not necessarily. Yeah. It leads to a higher hygiene within the team, not necessarily more motivation. Motivation is a completely different axis, right? So
yeah. That's for that I need an explanation, Jared.
Okay.
So because I mean I would say that could from how I see it, that could be one of the effects and one of the justifications, right? I mean, most people don't like conflicts. People who like conflicts probably are in positions or try to get into positions where conflicts are more or occur more often. But I would say the most engineers try to avoid conflicts because they are more in the technical part where there is enough decisions to do, right? Yeah. It's the joy of making things work.
Yeah.
And I would say it's a legitimate explanation for that. Okay, we have someone who takes off some of the conflicts, and that is good for increasing the productivity, which will ultimately increase the work experience.
Yeah. So yeah, this kind of care and attention to the team will definitely increase productivity. But even if it's just maintaining the hygiene, that's going to move you. Because imagine the quadrant. You want to move from the bottom left, where it's low hygiene, low motivation, to the top, where it's high hygiene and high motivation. And so by, again, shielding the team from these kinds of conflicts and other things, I mean, there's a lot of different examples we could do, but they're improving the hygiene. So this is where it gets really interesting, in recognizing that there's different forms of leadership. And with Agile, one of the key forms of leadership is called servant leadership. And what servant leadership is really all about is understanding that the team is the nucleus of the or the engine of productivity, and that you prioritize the needs of the team, because healthy team equals healthy project, for instance. And so servant leadership is really important here. And so if you have a Scrum Master who is non-technical working with engineers who are technical, and they devote their time to dealing with the adaptive challenges and maintaining or increasing the hygiene of the team so that the team can do their best work, there comes this inflection point where the team actually does the work that they're there to do, and they get motivated by that. So again, this is where we want to go into the different hormones. There's dopamine, there's endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin. For work, I would say that dopamine and endorphins are the big ones. And when you look at work, I'm sorry if I'm kind of jumping around from topic to topic, but I hope to wrap it all together in the end, is when the hygiene gets good enough that you can actually do the work that you're there to do, then there's the possibility to increase the motivation in a sustainable way, because there's always this kind of loop, this reward system. And so, you get something done and it feels really good. It's a release of stress. There's that task that's been sitting on your mind for the last 2 weeks, and you actually submit it. You get a good kick of endorphins, that stress relief. Or you might even get a good shot of dopamine. It's that pleasure of clicking that send and be like, ha, I'm that good. I'm that good. Generally, it's a mixture of both. It's not always one or the other, but it's that kind of reward system that you tap into. And so when you get into these kind of scaled scrum ceremonies, like story mapping, for instance, where you get all of these different teams together in this one big room, and you give them the day to talk everything over and to organize themselves and to figure out which team should do what and when, and also the dependencies and all of that stuff. What you're doing is you're giving them the autonomy to increase their mastery of their domain. They're there to do this work, and you're giving them the autonomy to do that. And by doing the work that they're there to do, they also get better. So this really taps into that whole autonomy, mastery, and purpose thing. But you can only get there if you have at least minimum hygiene. And so again, it's depending on where...
It's what many people call the flow, right? That you get into the flow.
Exactly.
And by this forget your environment, but you are so productive, and it's all working like in theory.
Yeah.
Without practical... Oh, I lost my earplug.
Yeah, flow is a really good example of this. And so with flow, you have the challenge versus the skill. Yeah, if you have a high challenge, high skill thing, what you want to do is, let me start this example again. Let's say you have an engineer with a skill level of 8. What you want to do is make sure that the way you get the most out of that engineer with a skill level of 8 out of 10 is by making sure that they get as close to the flow line as possible. So that's the diagonal. And so by hygiene can be understood on the challenge line. So if you have poor hygiene, you're artificially increasing the challenge level. Not only does the engineer have to do the work that they're there to do, but they have to engage in daily politics. They have to figure things out constantly with, different teams on a political spectrum, not necessarily a technical spectrum. They have to worry about their administration. They have to worry about, are they doing a good job because they don't have feedback? They have to worry about all of these things. They have to worry about, are they going to get food poisoning the next time they go to the canteen because their hygiene is also low. I mean, these are all hygiene factors. And so by having poor hygiene, what you're doing is you're artificially inflating the challenge level of the task. And so you have an engineer with a skill level of 8, but the challenge level is 10. That's not optimal flow. So what you want to do is lower the challenge level by increasing the hygiene. That way the engineer gets onto that flow level, and once they're on that level, they can ride it up.
So we are already talking for 20 minutes now. Let's get the curve a bit. what interests me and what the reason that we actually started the talk last time was this claim I'm thinking about a lot. Is that is this claim that agile is that non-engineers tell engineers what to do. Yeah? And somehow we talked about it. We kind of rejected that claim a bit. Yeah? But maybe we can close this discussion today with why does this claim exist in the first place? So if the non-engineers in the team have such an important role, why is there still that claim?
Sure. I think it all just comes back down to bad implementation, poor understanding and bad implementation. And this is really an awesome question because we've already talked about technical challenges versus adaptive challenges. And the thing is that Agile is there to really focus in on the adaptive challenges. How do we mobilize people across tough challenges in a complex environment? How do we do that? That's really what Agile is there to answer. That way we can get the most out of the engineers, or the company can benefit, etc. But the problem is that there's a lot of people who are not very well versed in the different forms of leadership or the different types of challenges, and they see kind of everything as a technical challenge, and therefore the company isn't working well enough. How do we fix it? What app do we install? What department do we make? How do we just do it? And so as an Agile coach, it's interesting to read the job ads, because you can get a sense of how the company is treating Agile in the company. And more often than not, they're treating Agile as an additional layer that they expect to fix the company, as opposed to an integral part of the company. And so the Scrum started out a little bit cursed, at least in the mainstream sense, by the book How to Do Twice the Work in Half the Time. Isn't that the dream of anybody? No matter what kind of leadership you do. I mean, that's the dream. How do you do more with less? But the problem is I think that a lot of people read the title, saw Scrum, and was like, all right, that's it. They never bothered to read the book. And so they treat Scrum, which is part of Agile, as a technical fix, as a technical solution to an adaptive challenge. And so the implementation of Agile of any scale is often very fraught at the beginning, which is one of the biggest challenges of an Agile coach, especially at the enterprise level, is to effectively re-educate the people who initially implemented this on the actual implications of Agile and how to approach it. And more often than not, it takes quite a long time to do that, because there are some ideas that are already so embedded, some behaviors that are already so embedded, and also leadership styles that are all already embedded.
Yeah, and this is probably that when people roll out some agile method, that it's like it affects everyone, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not only the others who have to change their way of working, it's also yourself.
Absolutely.
And probably leaders tend to forget that, right? It's mostly about them and not so much about the engineers they
200%.
are taking care of. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about leaders is there's a lot of different types of leadership. There's pace setting, there's participative, there's coaching leadership, there's affiliative, there's servant leadership, and there's situational leadership. And everybody is skilled in different ones. Hopefully everybody has a mixture of these. But more often than not, in these large, highly complex, highly regulated companies, especially ones that are on the stock market that are investor driven rather than consumer driven. The type of leadership that rises to the top and is really glorified is called pace setting. And this is good for short bursts where you want to have high standards and quick results. But it's not a long game type of leadership. And unfortunately, it's this type of leadership that has the tendency to see everything as a technical solution because it sees everything as a technical problem. This is how you reduce complexity and overcome things. And it works. It definitely works. But again, it has its time and it has its place. And if your company is trying to play the long game, you really need to build in other styles of leadership, servant leadership being one of them, prioritizing the needs of your team. I think that one thing is a whole other video that we could do. And there's also, again, different styles, but the core is situational leadership. And what that is effectively all other styles of leadership rolled up into one. And you need to, as the leader, assess what is the challenge at the moment. Is it technical or is it adaptive? Is it really that? How do I lead through this? Do I need to, really accentuate my coaching leadership, or are people not having a good time, or is the group starting to break up, and then then I'll need to start affiliative leadership, etc. There's a lot of nuance to this, and it's the leaders that can do that and who can do that well are the ones that are going to succeed in the long run.
Okay, I think that is a good end. One last question. So if you think about our talk, we are acting here like a team producing something.
Sure.
So where are we in the spectrum and with the 4 quadrants?
Let's see, the hygiene is quite low.
Yes, I would say so. But motivation high, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For those who are watching this, we struggled with technical issues, cameras, microphones, batteries, etc. for maybe an hour. Let's call it 45 minutes. Yeah, we struggled for quite a long time. We were absolutely motivated to start, but our systems didn't want that. So yeah, we struggled for a long time. But I think we're quite motivated. We've done multiple recordings up until now, and honestly, I would love to continue doing more. I'm super motivated there. They get better and better, and so I think we're in the low hygiene, high motivation, and so hopefully as these recordings continue and get better, maybe we can justify investing in better equipment and increase our hygiene.
Exactly.